This podcast is part of the How We Are network. For information on this episode and many other like-minded shows, visit howweare.org. That's HOWWEARE.org.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of 100 Words or Less, the podcast. I'm your host, Ray Harkins, and today is my goddamn birthday. It's October 1st. I just had to put it out there. So send me presents, send me money, whatever you have that you'd like to give as a birthday present, you can just send it to me and I'll really appreciate that. That's of course me being sarcastic. Anyways, the guest this week is Chris Hornbrook, the drummer for, I hate to use the word, but metalcore juggernaut known as Poison the Well. And he also currently plays in a band called Big Black Delta. He's a drummer, dude. He's a drummer. He's played for a lot of people over the years, but like I said, most notably, Poison the Well. Because who hasn't listened to Poison the Well that's been into hardcore, punk, independent music, whatever? You've undoubtedly heard at least one song from them. So anyways, more on Chris in a minute. Let's get the business out of the way. Propertyofzach.com, they are our media partners. You need to be visiting there on a daily basis. Go there, you will find the latest in music reviews, the latest in tour updates, the latest in record updates. Like, there's just so much stuff in there, and they also do great editorial stuff. They did great reviews on the Riot Fest that happened a few weeks ago. Just a lot of cool takes on this scene and independent music in general. So visit them. Also, go to the show's website, 100wordspodcast.com. I recommend stuff on pretty much a daily basis. You'll be able to find music, movies, whatever, some sort of pop culture artifact that you'll be able to trip into and hopefully enjoy in some capacity. And if you want to review the show, go into iTunes, write some sentences if you're feeling generous, or if you're not feeling generous and you just want to drop some stars, because I know I mention it every show, but it really does make a world of difference because, this show, I'm going to start trying to get advertisers for it because, as much as this is an awesome thing and I get a lot out of it, just from a selfish perspective, costs start to add up, whether it's like my travel time, driving all over the place to interview people, or just the simple cost of hosting these shows. It's not astronomical. I mean, it's not like thousands of dollars, but it's hundreds of dollars each year, and I just want to start covering that. So anyways, all that stuff adds into an advertiser looking at the show and being like, oh, hey, that looks like there's people that enjoy this, and it's got a lot of reviews on iTunes, so that helps. That's kind of why I keep harping that. So yes, and then you have heard at the very beginning of the show, we are part of the How We Are podcast network. Basically, I got together a few different shows who I personally listen to and really like and really respect the content that they are putting out. And it's just fun. Basically, we all travel within the music world. There is the podcast called Stuff You Will Hate from a previous guest in the show. His name's Sergeant D. Has some really cool and funny guests on. The most recent show that he did was with The Story So Far, and it was very, very entertaining look at those dudes. And they just kind of, cut jokes for about 45 minutes of the hour-long podcast, and then also got to some really cool talks that the band obviously was very comfortable in sharing. So anyways, there's that show. There's Let's Talk About Feelings, which, they label themselves as the black sheep of this podcast network. I don't necessarily agree. They may not hit on music as much as the other shows do, but it lives within the music world, especially their continuing coverage of the Fest down in Florida. They kind of preview bands and other things they're excited about to watch down there. So check out that show. And then there's also Nothing to Write Home About, which is Matt Pryor from the Get Up Kids. It's his podcast, and he has some extremely entertaining guests just because he is so close with the people that he brings on. The most recent one that he did with Will Noon, I really enjoyed that one. That was, he's the drummer for Fun, and they just had a lot of cool stuff going on. So check out those shows. Go to the website, howweare.org. Business is all out of the way. one last thing, there's a little observation, or actually more so a recommendation, because I've been getting some emails recently being like, why did you even come up with the idea to start a podcast? And I mean, I've always been pretty open about the fact that I'm basically just ripping off the stand-up comedian Mark Maron. He does a show called WTF, and if you haven't checked that out, I highly, highly recommend that. He does 2 shows a week, and it's great content and great, honest conversation. So basically, I took that idea and wanted to do that. But I've always had a love for radio in general. Like, I remember as a kid, they always had, I mean, I think everybody has heard the War of the Worlds, Orson Welles original, like 1934. I can't remember exactly when it was broadcast, or actually 1923 maybe. That's another date that just sticks out in my head. But I've always loved that sort of radio drama. There's also a show that, and I don't even know why I got into this stuff, because it's like, I'm like 9 or 10 years old and I should be playing video games, but I'm getting super into radio drama, like Old Time, The Shadow. And there's also my favorite show of all time is called Arch Oboler's Lights Out Everybody. Like, just saying that gives me chills. It's so fucking good. You can find it online super easily. They have all the shows up for free. I mean, I think he did maybe like 6 years worth of shows, like so much stuff. And, it's radio drama. So it's like, 5 or 6 people in a room acting this scene out in the way that like a play would unfold, except this is all based around the supernatural. Some of it's cheesy, but some of it is just really fucking tense. And especially for the time that they were doing it, just mind-blowingly awesome. So anyways, it's a little random radio history, because essentially podcasts are radio. And so that's kind of how I equate the two. So let's talk about Chris Hornbrook. Chris played drums for Poison the Well for the entire band's duration. I mean, missing, maybe, I think he says like maybe the first year of the band. I can't recall exactly. But the important fact to know is, he was just so candid about his time in that band, because Poison the Well, for all intent and purposes, they revolutionized the way that hardcore and metal and whatever sounded in the late 90s. They took something that really hadn't previously been done before and incorporated that into the music scene. Like, I think anybody that goes to shows that is older than the age of 25 remembers when Opposite of December came out. It was just like earth-shattering. Everyone was like, oh my God, what the fuck is this record and why is it so good? And to watch that band rise to prominence, where it's like they would come through Southern California, play in front of, 300 or 400 people, next time play in front of like 600 people, and then it's just like, then they're playing the House of Blues, which at the time, that's not what hardcore bands did. And it was just awesome to watch all of these people get brought into the scene and brought into, I guess, hardcore in general by just this, sort of a mainstream-ish type band. And I don't know, it was just incredible. So Chris talks about that. He talks about his craft as a drummer, and it was just a very awesome conversation. I went to his studio in Garden Grove, and we just hung out there for, I think we talked for close to 2 hours. This is a more condensed version of that. But here's our conversation, and I'll talk to you afterwards. Right, and so it's like my own introduction was like, I was aware of Poison the Well, and it actually promised.
Is this going now?
Yes, we're going, man.
We're
going.
Okay. I didn't know we were going.
No, it's fine. Because did you play in Promise No Tomorrow, or was it?
No, it was an Acre Lost.
That's right. But you guys did a split with that, right?
Yeah. So the story with that was me and Ryan used to play when I was like 15. I was 15. I think he was like 18.
Yeah.
We played in like kind of like a pop punk. I don't want to say pop punk in the sense of what pop punk is now, but
right.
Old school AFI-ish sort of like band.
Right.
And him and our old singer Ari were trying to, they talked about doing a hardcore band, and they were just trying to assemble friends, and I got asked to join.
Yeah.
Ryan, I remember I was with Ryan, and we were driving around in his old van doing something. We stopped at like a 7-Eleven. And he asked me, he's like, hey, me and Ari and these people are putting together this thing. Would you be interested in playing drums? Yeah. And I was like, absolutely. Like, this is playing. At that point, 15 years old, I'd only been playing drums for like 3 or 4 years, and I just want to play with as many people as possible, because I knew that what was going to allow me to grow and get out there and meet more people, become a better musician, so on and so forth. And I started playing, and at that point, like, I was just playing in punk bands.
Right.
So everything was fast, everything was whatever.
Yeah.
And it just, the way I played at that point wasn't really inclined for what they were trying to do. It was hardcore. It was heavy and, you know, slow, then fast, and, you know, it was just kind of a different vibe than what I was used to doing.
Right.
So I got kicked out. They were like, hey, we don't think it's working out, blah, blah, blah. And they got this other dude that was like, you know, he didn't really sort of, as a dude, he fit in with them better at that point.
Right.
But his playing, not to say that I was great at the time,
right.
But the elements that I had outweighed what he had. It just took me going to a few shows and expending my money a little bit more to really figure out, okay, this is what these dudes were talking about that they needed.
Right.
So he was in the band for 2 or 3 months, and then after that, they just like, hey, you know, we kicked him out. It wasn't working. Would you want to come back? And I was like,
got it.
For sure.
So, So I just remember it was weird because I don't even know where I got that split. I think I might have been doing like freelance writing or something, where it got sent to me, and I just remember. So I remember that.
I didn't plan it because that was the 3 months in which, because I helped kind of write the songs.
Okay.
Some of them, not all of them.
Right.
I think like Obstacle. Actually, I don't even remember these songs.
Yeah, I was about to say, if you remember the song names, you were impressive.
Obstacle. Fuck. All I remember is Obstacle because I couldn't play double kick. And like there was,
and that was required.
I was like,
sure.
You know, and I remember it was just like, it was all shitty at practice. Like, man,
damn it, I can't do this.
It never got better. Like, I've never been a really great double kick player. My inclination to play has always been like rock. So like the metal, like the very staccato feel and the feet and all the chops and shit like that. Like, I've developed chops since then, but they're not like the crazy like fast. It's like kind of like, I say jazzy because I'm not a jazz dude, but it has that sort of...
It has that vibe.
That swing to it, you know?
Right. So I remember getting that. So it's like... And then when Poison put out their first EP on Good Life, I think, again, it was like freelance writing where I got that sent to me, and I was like, oh, this is cool. This seems to be happening. Or like, there's something interesting here. But then, obviously, it's like the complete game changer. I remember, I think it was... I think I just got it at a distro to show, like Opposite to December.
Distros
and I think,
at shows.
Of course, back when that existed. Because I want to say that Opposite to December came out the same day as like Walls of Jericho, it was like...
Yeah, I think they were like a simultaneous
release. Yeah. But I remember
Trustkill was like, hey, we're putting out Opposite and we're putting out, I forget the name of that record, but Walls of Jericho record.
Right, and so I remember getting it. It was like that summer. Because what year did that come out? Was that...
99.
99, okay.
Yeah.
I just remember, I mean, it was like you could not talk to anybody that hadn't heard that record. It was like...
it's killer.
Right.
It's really rad, actually, because it's like none of us had really expected that.
No, and it was honestly the first time in my own life where I really remember like a record capturing a scene, so to speak. Like no matter what you were into, if you were into like independent music, hardcore, whatever, like... You were like, oh yeah, of course, dude, fucking Poison the Well, like that record, holy shit!
It's totally right place, right time.
Yeah.
And like also looking back on it, it's just like obviously all of us listen to hardcore music. You know, Derek was like really, really into fucking like Converge and like the whole Hydra Head scene. I mean, he kind of bounced around dependent upon where we were in the career, but at that point, he was really into that. And then Ryan was really into progressive rock and like, but he also loved like old school hardcore.
Right.
So it's like everybody kind of had like a different sort of take on it. So it was like a bunch of dudes kind of coming together that like kind of liked everything under that sort of that umbrella.
Right.
But then too like Ryan having like a very like unique, because like the sound of Poison Well, that very like dissonant sound, that's Ryan. You know what I mean? Like I have to attribute that the sound of Poison Well is Ryan Premack.
Right.
Like I mean obviously we've all sort of being in the band and
you've put your stamp on it. Yeah.
Like Derek took it and ran and did his thing with it, and me like creating with both of them, be like, hey, we got these parts, how do we put these together? And then, you know, we all sort of, you know, drew from that, you know, his creativity, but ultimately the sound of Poison Well is Ryan.
Right,
you know what I mean? And like without Ryan, there is no Poison Well, even though we all were elements to it. You know, Derek was a very big element, I was a big element, Jeff was a big element. Without Ryan,
you wouldn't have sounded like what you guys did.
Exactly.
Exactly. I just remember that, like I said, that summer where it was like it just took over. Like when did you yourself? And I mean, I'll back up even further, you know, after this question. But when did you yourself like notice that it was like obviously this record became a thing where it was just like wow, like whether it was like. It's just kind of a, you know, I'm sure it was a gradual build, but
yeah, it was definitely a gradual build, but it was more of those things that like with us being an Acre Lost and then the Distance EP came out, like no one in South Florida, no one gave a fuck about us. We were still like the black sheep, or this like weird band with like, at that point in that lineup, everybody was awkward. I was awkward. Ryan was.
Of course.
We had 2 singers. It was just weird. It was just a really weird thing.
Right.
You know what I mean? And then we kind of refined, and people left, or we kicked people out, and
right.
And then, you know, we got, like, the lineup. We got Jeff, and then, you know, Derek, and then we kind of, like, pieced it together. Like, okay, this feels right. This is cool.
Mm-hmm.
And then we wrote Opposite, which was, if I remember correctly, the way it was written was weird because it was, like, clusters of songs that were written with, like, me and Ryan, if I remember correctly, and like, whoever else was in the band. And then Premac quit to play with Fear and Weapons Meet because he just wasn't, that was just more where his head was at. So at that point, me and Derek and Jeff were like, okay, what are we going to do? And then me and Derek were like, well, let's just piece some shit together. Because literally, those songs are just some shit pieced together.
Of course.
There's like very like... There's
yeah,
no,
you weren't
like,
ready for the song structure.
Oh, no, there's no semblance of pop structure or even like a progressive... Nothing. It's just like, all right, Derek, like, what do you got? Okay, cool. Like, well, I have this thing. Like, and I play like a guitar part. I'm like, oh, that'd be cool. Like, literally, we just slapped this shit together.
Right. As most bands did during that time.
That was
riff upon riff upon riff.
No. This was the best thing. This is what Jeff coined it as riff salad.
Right.
Riff salad.
It's totally true.
Yeah, and it was awesome. You know, it was really like that totally like summed it up. But yeah, so we wrote it in it was written in like 2 different bits because Premac quit, and then we toured for like a week. We did like a little run, and then me and Derek, and then let's say Jeff didn't have anything to do with it. Obviously, Jeff would come in after, and he'd put vocals down, and figure out, should I scream here? Should I sing here? Should I talk here? Like how should I go about doing this? But in writing it, like, it was broken up into 2 things, and like, okay, well, we have these songs, we have like 9 songs, and we were all excited, and like, we just wanted people like to come to the shows and like feel accepted, essentially. At least that's how I felt, because like we were always like the black sheep. We were always like the weird band with the weird people that like nobody came. And then suddenly like we got like a lineup that like worked, and then we put out a record. Like, it'd be really rad if kids showed up to the shows and sang, and then they started doing that, and it just started getting really fucking wild and weird.
Right. And I think I definitely remember because obviously it's always hard to pinpoint where it's like I said, where it started to feel like a thing. But I definitely remember. I think it was, I want to say it was either Hellfest 99 or 2000, where it was like...
That was the big thing. Like, that was where it's like, holy shit, like, people... Because I remember they did, like, a poll of who you're here to see, and it was just, like, obviously Converge was at the top.
Yeah.
And then it was another band, and it was, like, us.
Right.
It was, like, we were, like, in the top 3 rock, and it was just, like, it was bizarre, because, like, no one had, like, kind of... Like, that wasn't, like, the goal. The goal was just to write cool songs at that point with, like, our abilities.
Right.
And our budgets as well, because Opposite was recorded in like a week.
Right.
We spent no time. I mean, it's some of the most embarrassing playing.
Right.
Yeah, it's just like...
you had no time.
Yeah, at the time you think, oh, that shit's rad, I'm going to put this there, I'm going to put that there, and it's just like, even like a few years, like listening back later, I'm just like, man, that shit sucked.
I wish I could have done that over. Right.
And like sometimes, even to this day, which is really bizarre, people are like, I really want that snare sound from that record. I was like, are you fucking kidding me? That record drum sounds terrible. The performance is terrible. The sounds are I mean, it was like a budget ass record. I mean, I know that contributed to it because you listen to like Bad Brains records. If like the earlier stuff was like mega produced, it wouldn't feel the same.
No, it doesn't have the same energy.
Same thing with like old Beatles records and like Led Zeppelin and shit like that. Like the technology that they had at the time, it became a part of it. The character of the music. Imagine like Beatles songs now with like
auto-tune,
auto-tune and all that. It would just be the worst fucking thing ever.
No, you definitely are whatever you're given, you obviously try to use to the best of your ability, and that's all you guys did.
Yeah. But it was like I said, like I'm really, as much as I'm like, I can't, no, that shit. That's I cringe at certain stuff, and like I especially too. I'm 32 years old. Like we wrote and recorded that from like 17 to like 18, 19. At least for me and Derek, because me and Derek were like the same age.
Right.
I have a hard time identifying with that now.
Oh, of course.
Where I'm at. I had a hard time identifying with it like 7 years ago. Because, you move in different directions.
Of course.
But I'm really, really, really grateful for that record and everything that it allowed us to do and the opportunity that it brought.
Of course.
And like, I don't look at it as being any sort of influential record because I just don't think of myself and us as that. It's just like I'm making music with 4 of my friends and we all have the same goal of what we want to do.
Right.
I mean, I'm like I said, I'm just really grateful for like people's sort of appreciation for
right. Well, that something like, because all that anyone can do as a musician is like, if your music lasts for even 10 years, 20 years, whatever, that's you have to be thankful for that, because there's obviously so much shit that gets put out.
Oh no, totally. That's it. Like, I don't look at it, but when people tell me like it's a super influential record, it's like top. It's just like it's hard for me to grasp it, because I'm just like, I just think of just a bunch of kids in the studio not knowing what they're doing, and putting together some riff salad songs. And like playing to the best of our abilities, which were like on a grade scale,
rudimentary at best.
On a grade scale was like maybe like a D-, maybe an F.
Yeah.
I'm speaking for
of course, yourself. And so you yourself, like, born and raised in Florida. Where did you come up?
Yeah, I was born in Hollywood, Florida.
Okay.
And my parents lived in North Miami for like the first year of my life. Mm-hmm. And then we moved up to a place called Lauderhill, which at best is very ghetto. Very ghetto. I was the only white kid in like an all-black neighborhood. At times there were other like white counterparts that would come in. Sometimes I wouldn't. We wouldn't get along, or sometimes we would get along.
Right.
But for the most part, and there's actually some people that I still speak to from.
Back in those days.
Yeah, this dude that I grew up with, this guy Ray Smith, that a very good dude. Yeah. Knew his family, like literally lived next to me, and like I still
I remember
the first inclination of just memory that I have. He's in that. Yeah. And like even 32 years later, like I still remember it.
You still remember that?
It's just kind of rad. You know?
So what did your do you have brothers and sisters, and what did your parents do for a living?
My parents both came from Canada. My dad was born in Montreal.
Oh, wow.
And my mom was born in like a super, super small town, like I think like 4 hours north of Quebec City. So middle of nowhere.
Right.
So my dad was a bass player. He traveled around. Eventually met my mom. Oh, I had grandparents that would come down the snowbirds, which is like a typical...
Yeah. Gotta go to Florida.
Right? Yeah, gotta go to Florida. They would go for the wintertime and the summer times and shit like that, or some of that.
Yeah.
My grandma had really high blood pressure, so they would spend more time in Florida. So my parents were just like, "Hey, let's just go down.
Let's go to Florida.
Let's just go there." And then they liked it, and then they just stayed there.
Got it. Yeah, because I was wondering. I was like, "Oh yeah, like Canada to Florida. That doesn't necessarily make the." But I understand the connection.
Yeah. There's just a lot of Canadians just come down.
Yeah.
And because it gets offensively fucking
cold
in the winter, so they come down, and it's like it's like it is in California right now. For like 2 weeks in Florida.
Right. What do and no brothers or sisters?
No, only child.
Okay.
I had like a cousin that was like an older brother figure that would come in and out. He lived about an hour north, and sometimes he would come stay with us, and he would work with my dad, because my dad was a musician.
Right.
Obviously, you have a kid. You're not going to be a musician.
You're not a musician anymore. Right.
Done with,
Birth into this world, was that planned, or was that oh hey, this is happening?
It was planned by one, and it was not planned by the other. I'm sure you could figure out who was planned by and who wasn't planned by.
Okay, got it.
So yeah.
So but at least your dad obviously felt the level of responsibility to be like, okay,
I'm really, really lucky, because both sides of my family, I come from like a really like, what's the best way to describe it? Especially, the way shit is today, and there's just crazy kids, and like, you see on the news of just these like shitty moms and shitty dads.
Of course.
Like, I don't know if it's just because of the times now to what the times were, say, in like the 80s, but I'm really, really, really lucky, because my mom is an immensely intelligent woman, and my dad is an immensely responsible, intelligent guy.
Yeah.
Both in different capacities, but
sure.
But mom's more book smart, dad's more like street smart.
Right.
So my dad came from a good family where it's just like, well, you got your girlfriend / wife pregnant.
Right.
You have to take care of her now. You have to take care of your child. And my dad's like, well, all right.
Here we go.
A family of seven kids, and I saw my dad, come from nothing.
Right.
Sweeping floors at a fucking, at a company, to eventually working his way up and becoming a co-owner of the company, making millions of dollars. Like, he understood the level of responsibility, because my grandpa always had jobs. He always had to provide,
Yeah, so he had it sounds like your father obviously had the hustle and the ability to, just realize the responsibility, which is awesome.
Yeah. I mean, and like I've learned a lot from both my parents, but I've learned that, like, a good work ethic from my dad. Because I spent tireless amounts of hours in this place, like, playing drums.
Right.
Just because it's like, okay, this is what I do, and I have really good opportunities. I've had, the ability to continue to do this and make money. Like, I have to be the best I can in my craft.
Right.
And I wouldn't have gotten that without my dad and my mom, because they both have
yeah.
great work.
And it's funny because hearing you say that, you've always, I mean, for the years that I've known you, you've always struck me as that person who, you view drumming as your craft. Like I mean, obviously there are people that we've played with and, played in bands over the years where it's just like they view that as like an instrument or just something fun or a hobby. Whereas like or
it's a way to be in a band so you could like say you're in a band and you can get girls.
Yeah.
You can have like the glorification that comes with it.
Sure.
And that's cool if that's your thing, but like, yeah, that's not. I've always gravitated because, like I said, my dad was a bass player,
right?
So
he instilled that in you,
even past me, him having to give up music, he always had his foot in some way. Like he tried to open up a recording studio in South Florida, which is damn near fucking impossible because like there's not much going on.
There's not much going on down there,
but he found different ways to just try to keep his foot in something.
Right.
So, I was always sort of exposed to it.
Sure. And so as you started to grow up, did you spend your formative years in that ghetto city as you?
Yeah, I spent about up until the age of 12.
Oh, okay.
In that city, and then my parents had just hustled and worked for a long time. My mom started working at a private university, and she was going to school.
Got it.
And my dad, he basically
and they were together the whole time.
Yeah, they were together the whole time. And then my dad, basically, my grandfather, my mom's father, was just like, "Hey, you got a son coming." My grandfather was a carpenter. And he's like, "Hey, here's a craft that you can make a lot of money off of. So you could provide for my daughter, and you could provide for your son."
Right.
So probably about 32, 33 years ago, my dad started becoming a carpenter, general contractor.
Okay.
That whole thing.
Yeah.
And what the fuck was I going with this? I do this all the time. I start talking about something like...
And you're like, where did that thread go?
Where the fuck am I trying to go with this shit?
No,
the providing. Okay, yeah. So basically, my dad worked his way up and made more money. So up until the age of 12, like, they had just been saving and shit. And
sure.
So that's the point where they could afford a house. So we moved maybe about 15, 20 minutes north, which... recently isn't that far.
Yeah.
It's like an all-white neighborhood.
Sure.
With, like a really nice house. And my dad, like, renovated for months because,
Yeah, because he had the ability to do that. Yeah.
And so, I spent my formative years from, like, 3, because that's when I could remember reality of existing.
Right.
Until 12. And then from 12 until about 18, 19, I lived in that place. I went to high school and shit like that. But once I started touring, I've always kind of looked at, like, okay, like, X amount of time is on the road, X amount of time is at this place.
Right.
And I slowly started kind of breaking my way apart from it.
Right. And so so as you started to go to high school, because those are your formative years as far as like, that's when you start to be able to develop your own personality and make choices on your own.
Yeah, you start understanding music.
Right,
and
right.
You start understanding what certain cliques of people and what their interests are. Like, you can kind of see like where they're going to go in life. And,
right. Where did you start? Because obviously, since music was always an important part of your life, and like that was always a value instilled in you. But once you started to get to high school, like, when did kind of independent music come a part of your world, and like when did that start to swallow you up?
Well, music started for me. Obviously, when you're a kid, you listen to whatever. Like, I listened to like Vanilla Ice and MC Hammer and all that shit.
Yeah,
because you just don't know anything. You're just kind of like, oh, rad, like this guy, and like.
Yeah, he's awesome.
Whatever, he's rad. You don't know about anything.
Right.
And I remember really, like, falling in love. The first rock band that I ever fell in love with was, like, Queen.
Oh, okay.
And I was like, this is rad, this is amazing, blah, blah, blah. And then Nirvana came in. And obviously Queen and Nirvana is separated by a good amount of years, but I just had kind of gravitated towards that. I'm like, this is rad, and these songs, and blah, blah, blah. And then, Nirvana and Soundgarden, that whole thing came in. But I was a little late to the Nirvana thing. I didn't jump on the wagon when Nevermind came out.
Mm-hmm.
I sort of jumped on like maybe like as In Utero was coming out.
Okay,
I bought the Nevermind record.
Right.
I was like, this is cool.
Right. But you didn't identify with it until
it just didn't really click. I was like, this is cool. And this is rad. And then In Utero came out, and that for me was like a game changer. Like, even to this day, it's like one of my top 5 favorite records. There's not one bad song on that record.
Yep.
The production, the performance, just everything about it to me is like perfect for a raw record that doesn't sound like shit.
Yeah, of course, right. And that was very successful from a commercial perspective, right?
Same thing for Soundgarden, Super Unknown. Even though Spoon Man is not really one of my favorite songs,
right?
Every other song on that record's rad, and they were able to sort of find the balancing point of like having a big, huge commercial sounding rock record, but then having it feel raw and like feel like
have a life behind it.
Yeah, exactly. If you listen to it, it's just, those two records for me, like production wise, if someone's like, hey, you can make a rock record and you could have a raw production, but it still has to be big and whatever. I would.
Those are two reference points.
Even though they're different.
Yep.
They're definitely different reference points. Obviously, whatever I would be doing at the time, I'd have to be like, well, it's more in line with this, or more in line with that.
Right.
Those would still, even to this day, I would gravitate towards those two records.
Sure.
I think that they both sound phenomenal for rock music and having the sort of that grit. Needed,
it's got guts behind it, but then obviously it has a heart behind it too.
Yeah.
And so when did you start to delve into, like you were saying, like obviously the first like sort of punk bands that you were playing in, like?
So it started with like local bands.
Yeah.
There was like local hardcore bands and local punk bands, and for the most part, all the names escaped me. I don't know why. I remember there was a hardcore band called Tension, which...
they put out some stuff. I
remember seeing them way back in the day.
Yeah.
And there's not many venues that play in South Florida. There was this one place called The Edge, which was like the place.
Right.
It was, I think, cap on the room was like maybe 1,000.
Oh, okay.
It was probably more at that time because the venue is still open now, but it's called Revolution, and they went in and like, there's fucking Shepherd Ferry art on the wall. And they cut like a quarter to like a third off of the back, so it's not as big. But that was like the spot, and like back in the day it was super grimy and gritty, and I remember going there and seeing like Tension, and like it was like a hardcore band, then it was like a ska punk band, and then it was just like a hodgepodge because it's just like South Florida. There's not like California. There was like particular scenes, like this is the metal scene or this is the hardcore scene, and like all those clusters of bands stay together and they play together.
Right.
South Florida, it was like kind of like
whoever we can get. You played a band, yeah.
I mean, there were at that point there were certain some bands because there was like AAA Against All Authority. There was this band called Hudson. There was this band called the Crumbs. I mean, and that was kind of like that was more of like the punk realm as there being other punk bands as well.
Right.
And then the hardcore scene, there was like Tension, and I think Shai Hulud it was Strong Arm. I think was around at that time. Strong Arm was around at that time. And I mean, obviously there are way more.
Of course, yeah.
I'm just trying to think off the top.
Bird of Ill Omen,
Bird of Ill Omen, early incarnation Bird of Ill Omen when Damien Moyle was still.
Yeah. But yeah, because I mean, Florida was always weird from an outsider's perspective because, like, being from Southern California and starting to get into hardcore and punk like around the same time, like whatever, like 95, 96, and started becoming aware of like, oh, there's other pockets that exist, and I definitely remember South Florida being like, oh, there's weird, like there's interesting stuff that comes out of there.
South Florida's a really weird place because you have Strong Arm and Shai Hulud, which share the same drummer,
right?
And they were all friends, and they shared like a sort of like there was a thread that went through both of the music.
Completely.
You could those two were together. Then you had Then you had Morning Again, which was what Morning Again was.
Right.
And then you had Bird of Ill Omen, and then you had, this is like pre-Poison the Well.
Of course.
The bands that,
like when you started to go to shows and started to see that it existed, right?
Yeah, like Bird of Ill Omen, there was this band from Miami called Brethren.
Yeah. Culture.
Culture was pre-me.
Yeah. No, I know that was pre-me. I mean, that was like 90, early 90s, like to like 94-ish or something like that. Yeah, but no, totally.
Yeah.
It's a weird, but did you get introduced to shows just like via friends at high school, or like how did you, since you didn't being an only child, you don't have that sort of older brother experience, like,
you don't have the older brother that kind of hands you down and like, yeah. I think, you know what it was? I remember the definitive moment. Was that two of my friends that like weren't associated with anything. They just they punk rock. Like they listened to like NoFX and Pennywise when all that shit was like really big and still like I'm not to say that it isn't anything now because obviously NoFX is still a relevant band.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
But I remember them saying there's this one particular club in the city that I lived in, Davie. It's called Club Q. Mm-hmm. And then they were just telling me, they're like, we went to this venue and there was just like normal people there, and then they got on stage and played, and it was just to us, it just like it was this thing that was just like, what?
Yeah,
like,
a light bulb went off. Yeah.
Because at that point it's just like,
right.
I went to what were the concerts that I went to see prior to that? It was the idea that it was an achievable idea to get on, like, write some songs,
right, and get on stage. Well, you look at your reference point of just like Queen, like one of the most theatrical bands of all time. You're like, how can someone achieve that? So I totally. Yeah,
and it was just like there's just these normal dudes, and like they just got on stage. So at that point, I started going to shows at Club Q, and then I started meeting people. Then I started branching out, and like it is. You kind of
you start to see a scene, and you're like, oh, I want to be a part of this, right?
Yeah. That's.
And had you started to play drums at that time too?
Yeah, I was playing drums. So
and why'd you choose drums? I know that seems like an obvious question, but like
I to be honest, like it really appealed to me just to beat the shit out of a drum.
Yeah.
No finesse, no nothing. It literally just to fucking beat the shit out of a drum.
Sure.
So I was like, that's rad. I let me try doing that, and I started playing drums.
Did your dad buy you the kit, or like, here you go?
Yeah, there was a kid in our neighborhood that was selling a CD percussion, like, you know, $85,000 for like $200, and it came with cymbals, but it was all janky, like.
Of course, yeah.
It was
a total intro kit, right?
Oh, a full-on intro kit, yeah. And this was like pre-Guitar Center, so it was just like
you couldn't.
My dad was like the idea, like drum sets a lot of money because you know you go to mom and pop places and they gouge you.
Yep.
So you know, $200. So it was like, all right, well, cool. You know, I got the kit, and it's like. They definitely were not stoked because they put the thing in my room and I would play.
Right.
It was totally punishing, especially because you're trying to figure shit out and you're trying to like.
Right. You're terrible for so long.
I mean, I was terrible even when I was in Poison the Well.
Right.
I mean, you know.
Right.
You know, the early Poison the Well stuff is like embarrassing. Like I can't even.
Oh yeah.
But I mean, you are your own worst critic, and you know.
Of course. Yeah.
But
that's cool that your parent, because it takes a certain level of understanding for parents to be like, yeah, you can get guitar and you can do this, but then it takes a different level to be like, oh yeah, drums, all right.
Well, no, but that's the thing. They bought me the kit, and it took me forever to like prove to them that this is like a valid path in life, which is a normal thing because like
course.
my dad, he was a bass player and he did some stuff. You know, he toured like South Africa and like he did his stint, but like
he had a frame of reference, right?
Yeah, but he wasn't part of a scene. He didn't listen to punk. He was trying to do the jump from like we're playing in a bar band and fucking
get signed to a major label
from fucking X record label shows up like I'm gonna give you $1 million because you guys are great, and then you go from being like the bar band to like being the fucking huge band in the world, biggest band in the world. You know, that was his frame of reference, that it was just this leap. And obviously the punk movement in like the was it late 70s, early 80s of like, no, we're just going to do that shit ourselves. We're going to put out our own records. We're going to get our own distro deals. We're going to get in the van. Like, he didn't understand the steps to get there.
Sure.
And obviously at that point, it was well established.
Of
so
course.
I was like, wow, there are steps. You don't necessarily, you're not going to be you're not going to be Nine Inch Nails where you're like, making millions of dollars per show, but like you can get to a point where like you could own a house and like you could own a nice car and like you could sustain
you can live comfortably. Right.
The steps have been built, but they weren't there for him. So I think for both my parents, they were just like, "What are you doing? Like, go to college, go do something."
Because you had no, I presume by the time that you started to go to shows and started to be fully entrenched in that in high school, you already were bitten. You were like, I'm not going to go to college. Like, there's no interest from that.
I wanted to drop out of high school. My mom was just like, no. My dad's just like, well, you drop out of college, you got to figure something out.
Yeah.
And I was like, fuck, I am going to have to figure something out. Like, because at the point, like, my parents had helped me buy a car, but they're like, oh, we'll help you get it, but you make the payments, you pay the insurance.
Right.
So I was like, fuck, I'm going to have to pay for this car now.
Right. You're like, God damn, I didn't realize that. Yeah.
Yeah, but not pay for the car, because I was paying for the car. I meant to say, like, man, I'm going to have to get a full-time job. Because at that point, I was working at, like, bullshit clothing store, bullshit restaurant or whatever. So I was like, man, that means I'm going to have to, like, work for real. And they're going to want me to, like, pay bills. I just wasn't ready for that, because at 17, 18 years old, like, you're still trying to be a kid. And,
of course.
Jack off in a corner or
right.
whatever the fuck, like
totally.
shit that you do as a kid, like you don't really want to take that big leap. I remember my dad's just like, you got to start paying for your cell phone. I was bummed as fuck. Now it's just like, as like a 32-year-old man, it's like I pay for a car, like
right. You have all these
real shit. Like I'm trying to like I'm not trying to buy a house now, but I'm trying to plan to buy a house.
Right. Well, but the first because that's like the first semblance of a responsibility where it's just like there's a bill that it has to be paid and the responsibility lies solely on you, and it's like, oh wait,
my parents weren't rich, like my like I said, like my grandfather on my dad's side got really lucky. Like I said, like his story is really unique because he came from like a broken home and like started sweeping the floors of the fucking company and eventually went to like making millions. Like, that to me is like a fucking rad, like the stories that he doesn't tell, because he's stoic as shit. He doesn't ever say anything.
Yeah. But what you have heard.
Yeah,
right.
What you would have heard, and like, it's just like, that to me is like a really fucking cool story. And he was generous with his kids, but he wasn't like to the point where he's just like, you don't have to do anything.
Yeah.
So
you're taken care of for the rest of your life.
My dad worked his fucking ass off, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Sometimes that he needed help. Obviously, parents help when they can.
Of course.
And I'm grateful for that, and everybody's grateful for it.
Of course.
But, my parents, like, buy me a house or like anything
Right.
like that. Like fuck, like
No.
ridiculous. They could barely hold on to their house.
Right,
Let alone,
right.
like buy me a house or buy me a car. Like they helped me buy a clunker.
Right.
You know, and I paid it off.
Right. And so then obviously as you started to transition into the idea of like, okay, I want to pursue music, I just have to figure out ways to
The
do this.
intangible
Like,
became tangible as soon as it was like, well, we're going on tour.
Yeah.
It's like, well, you know, okay, let's get in the van. Or, I remember the really big moment was like, okay, well, if we're going to start touring, we have to buy a van.
yeah.
And it was just like, whoa, that's like a huge fucking responsibility.
Yeah, it is.
And I forget how we did it. I think we financed it. We put it under Jeff's name. Jeff's like, oh, I'll do it.
Yeah.
And he just forgot to pay the payments a bunch of times and like shit all over his credit.
Oh, God.
And I remember at times that he'd be like, fuck, you know, he'd be in the van and like, oh, fuck, I forgot to make the payment or like whatever. And it was just in my back of my head, I was like, man, I'm glad I didn't.
You're like, I'm glad I didn't take that responsibility. Yeah.
It's just not on my name. I actually kind of forgot what happened to that van.
Right.
It
just faded away.
It faded away. I think at one point, like once Poison Wall got really rolling and like we could afford shit, I think we got like a Ford, like a brand new Ford or something like that. And I think it like stayed at Ryan's ex-girlfriend's place forever until they like just trashed it.
Right. Like, yeah, we'll sell it for scraps.
Something along those lines.
Another thing that impressed me about once Poison the Well started to, you know, like after Opposite December came out and there was so much attention to you guys. And then once you were in a position where you guys could like obviously, you know, and I don't use the words like give back, but like you always like, I mean, I so distinctly remember when, you know, I got a phone call for Taken to do like 4 or 5 shows with you guys on the West Coast. There was like no reason whatsoever for you guys to like give us that offer at all. But like we were ecstatic about it because we were like, okay, we're gonna be playing like, you know, we don't have to worry about kids not showing up to the show.
Which, by the way, let me make an off point that like a side note, if you will.
Yes.
That is funny because like I remember back in the day, like that band's fucking huge. They draw 150 kids. It's just like.
Yeah,
that's not huge.
No.
Huge is like if you're like, yo, you draw like 10,000 people.
Yeah, that's huge.
I love that. Like from the period of like '99 to like 2006.
Yep.
The frame of reference of huge was like you could draw 400 or 500 kids.
Oh, dude, huge. Yeah.
Huge. You know, and it's just like that's not huge.
Right. Yeah. It's just, relatively speaking, but yeah, it was like I just
relative to the scene and like what people were drawing. But it's just funny.
And the feeling like I distinctly remember. Like the feeling of not having to worry about if kids are going to show up to the show. Like I know at the very worst, there's going to be like 150 kids at the show. Like, and once you started to feel that, you're like, oh, okay, like this is okay.
Yeah,
like,
that's not bad.
You're right, exactly.
But because you were playing small rooms too, so
of course.
Like, you pack in 150 kids, like,
and it felt great.
A place like my studio, it's like the coolest fucking thing ever. Like you feel like you have the biggest dick in the world, but you're like, man, these kids are just in here,
dude, it's sold out, bro.
Yeah, and they're like hanging from the rafters and like, or not the rafters, like the ceilings, kicking holes in the walls, and like just like going apeshit. Like that was the coolest thing ever. Like,
it feels good. Yeah, but I always remember you guys obviously like, and I think knowing that you guys were kind of like like you said, the sort of, you know, weird band from the South Florida scene.
It went from weird band to being like the cool buzz band, and it was just like a weird concept.
Right.
Like no one was really like, everybody didn't want to treat it because like I know, especially now, I'm definitely not gonna name names because like it's just not my thing. But like certain bands, like, you know, they make a little bit of a wave and then they think they're fucking God.
Of course.
You know what I mean? Like
you see that all the time.
Yeah, that's like it's a pretty ubiquitous thing. Like especially now, and I think it's maybe because of where music's at, but also to maybe the generation that's coming in as well. Like this self-entitled, quote unquote.
Right.
But I remember all of us trying to be like, yo, like let's keep our heads as level as we can. Like try to like make clear decisions and like be responsible and smart about this because it's like. This is like our opportunity. Like we saw, like this is an opportunity to do something. Like, you know, we have these abilities, and we got a manager that's like, you guys can go to a major label and you can get money, or you can go to, you know, all these things. And it's like we have to like, we have to be responsible and smart about this and not blow our money and like.
That's cool. That's cool that you guys, because it did strike me that you always had that you had that mental headspace. But it was cool that you, like, so you guys really did legitimately have that conversation where it's like,
I mean, we could have easily when we got signed to Atlantic. I mean, fast forwarding, we could have easily got a way more money. Like as of now, like we got a shitload of money to like as a living advance and as a recording advance.
Right.
But I mean, the fact of the matter is this: like we could have probably got like 2 or 3 or 4 times that amount. But we're like, because we're like kind of this weird like heavy, obtuse, because at that point that was You Come Before You, which was like just like a weird, obtuse record.
Right.
You know, we have to be smart about this, and like the idea was always to double sales.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, Opposite did like 25,000.
Right.
And okay, then Terror did 50,000.
Right.
And then You Come Before You was supposed to do 100,000.
Right.
Which they all reached their mark, but like when you're on a major label,
they want to see the return quickly.
They want to see a million. That 100,000 of them is fucking nothing.
It's a joke.
They're just laughing. Just laugh at it.
Right.
But we were always like really. We tried to be like really conscious about it. Like that's why we didn't jump in a bus, and that's why we didn't have a lot of crew, because like we were just like let's not take a bunch of money. So there's not this big expectation. Let's not jump in the bus because bus is like $1,000 a day.
Yeah.
You know,
you're just burning money.
Yeah,
right.
you're just pissing money away, and we're like, let's just be smart about this. Let's approach this. We wanted to ferment ourselves as like a band that will be around, 10, 20 years, like the Tools or like the Deftones or like those type of bands where just like they could go out, and obviously we didn't even come close to reaching any of those marks, but that was the plan. It's just like you could just make the music you make and then go out and tour and fill up, 2,000 to 4,000 to 6,000 cap places and get huge guarantees, and you could sustain yourself and you could have a good life.
Right.
But
but no, I mean it's cool because from the outsider's perspective, it did strike me that you guys obviously were, intelligent.
We were too conscious about everything. That was also, it was as much as it was an advantage for us to think that way. It was also detrimental because sometimes we became too concerned with things that didn't matter.
Okay.
Opposed to like just being like, if these particular sect of kids don't give a shit about us anymore because we're not doing this, that, or the other.
Right.
You got to be true to yourself, and you got to do what makes you happy. Whereas just like sometimes dudes would get in headspaces where it's just like fuck, and they would be bummed, and you go on said message board or said site, and all these people are talking shit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, obviously it doesn't stay with you because it doesn't matter because whatever. But if you're one of those people that do troll the internet and you are in a band, you are gonna at some point fall upon something that is not favorable to your band, your record, whatever.
You as a person, right?
Yeah,
exactly.
You as a person or whatever, and you're just going to read it, and you're going to get bummed for 2 seconds, and then you're going to just like, well, whatever.
Right. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
So what did you reflect? I mean, obviously now that you have a chance to have perspective, what did you find that you guys were overly concerned about that obviously didn't? Was it like the fan base?
It was more just people pleasing. It was like people pleasing, like within like our internal structure of like managers, business managers, lawyers, people at like the record label, feeling that you have to have a friendship with them.
Okay.
And it's just like, it doesn't work that way. Like you can have a friendship.
You can be friendly.
You can be friendly. Like we're still friends with our old manager. He's managing Sleigh Bells now. You know, he met Derek 10, 12 years ago. You know what I mean? Like, and he's a good dude. And that obviously that friendship lasted. And I think everybody sort of understands, when it's time to talk about business, you sit down, you talk about business. When it's time to be friends, and you're friends.
Right.
Yeah. But I think everybody was too overly concerned about like not upsetting the order and not, trying to have a friendship with like the guy that, we were on like a sub label of Atlantic, but it was Atlantic. It was really weird the way the relationship worked, where like we would go into meetings and talk about this, that. There would be the guy from the sub label, and then be 2 or 3 people from Atlantic.
Right.
Atlantic wasn't just like the money people; they were like in on it as well as in terms of like the decision making and everything.
Sure.
So it's like everybody want to be like, oh, let's be friends, fucking guy from record label, let's be friends, and it's just like. You get let's be friendly, let's be cool, but like when it comes down to it, like we have to look out for ourselves, and I feel like sometimes that we didn't really fully do that because we were young and not fully aware.
Right. Well, and plus that's obviously how you conducted business in the past
in the hardcore scene.
Right.
Everybody we were buds with, and I mean, even to this day, even though that I'm not even playing in any hardcore bands.
Right.
That's important to me.
Right.
To show up in whatever band I'm in, be friends. Like I look at like being in a band, it's just as much as like now I'm more in the hired gun realm.
Right.
If I'm going to commit myself to something, if I'm going to say, okay, like I'm a hired gun, but I want to be with that. Like I want to be friends with the people that I'm in it. Like the person that I'm working for, said person or said people. Like I want to feel like it's not a job that I roll up and I do it. They appreciate me, I appreciate them. But at the end of the day, it's still their thing. They still make the decisions. At the end of the day, I show up, I collect my paycheck. I don't worry about merch. I don't worry about overhead.
Yeah.
But there's a mutual respect and understanding.
Sure. You want to leave people with that impression of just like, dude, Chris is professional. He's on point.
Yeah.
Like, just great. And because that way, that obviously paves the way for any other jobs you may get in the future or whatever. It's like you never know when things are going to come full circle.
Yeah, exactly. But, coming from the hardcore scene, like, you become friends with promoters. You become friends with people that run labels. You become friends with people in other bands. Like, the sense of community and the sense of family is like really, really important to me, even to this day. Even though that now I'm playing electronic music, dance music in a world that like everybody loves to fucking put their nose in the air. Other bands and think they're the fucking coolest thing ever.
Right.
I'm really lucky that I'm in a band with a dude that's like cool as shit and is totally like, as much as people might look at him and be like, he looks like that. Right. He's the complete opposite person. He's a very considerate person, very respectful dude, super professional. Yeah. And it's just like he hates that mentality.
Right. So he's rallying against it. But I think it's a very interesting point you hit on in regards to the fact that there were so many instances where you guys were obviously, like you said, you were so careful to handle your business a certain way, and then obviously when the machine churned you out as it did, where it's like after the You Come Before You, where it's like, because I just remember everybody being like, the way that the label was positioning you guys to be was like, hey, here's the next Deftones. Like,
yeah, that was the goal. But the problem is like we jumped on a major label not wanting to play ball. It's a very stupid move. We should have just been like, hey, Roadrunner, or hey, Epitaph. Right. Like, we have common interests, and you understand how a band like us would work. Right. And,
because there, I mean, at that point, there was a legitimate, like, quote-unquote bidding war for you guys. Like, everybody was talking to you and wanting to get...
Oh, yeah. Everybody was... I mean, like I said, we had, like, big sums of money thrown at us.
Right.
And it's just like, whoa, like, this is fucking crazy. I remember at one point I was sitting in the van. Yeah. And Derek comes in. He's like, oh, you guys want to fly to Los Angeles because after this tour, because, we need to seal this deal if we're going to get this record out. Right. In said time frame and have everything move in, like, a timely manner. Sure. We need to figure this out. Right. And at that point, it was between Atlantic and DreamWorks. Okay, yeah. And the dude at DreamWorks, they were interested, but at that point, they were dealing with AFI. AFI was really big, and I think they were bidding on a few of their bands that were more like in the rock kind of refused element. Oh, sure. Whereas at that point, we were like hardcore band, but we had like metal elements. Yeah. It was just more like a little bit less like you know what I mean? Like, of course. That particular sound and look and all that shit. Right. It's funny because then we went with Atlantic for, like, a very low sum of money, but even today's standards is, like, a shitload of fucking money. Right. Yeah. If I can make a record for what we made for You Come... I mean, I can make let's just put it this way, like, for what we made for You Come Before You, we could have made the record... How many times could we have made that record over? Probably, like, 7 or 8 or 9 times. Say the last Poison the Wall record, right? We made for X amount of dollars,
Yeah, which is, I mean, it's always funny to put it in that perspective. It's just, from the moment that you guys obviously made that decision to, go with Atlantic, and then obviously,
because they understood, right? This is the type of band we are. You're going to ask us to do this, and we're going to tell you to suck a dick. You're going to ask us to do that, and we're going to tell you to fuck off. And that was the whole coming back. That's the whole not playing ball part, right? And they're like, cool, tell us to suck a dick. It's fine. Because they thought that because we were able to sell X amount of units and we had this hype, that it was going to translate into that world. And it was gonna expand out. Right. And we just did everything to just fucking fuck ourselves in the ass. But the funny thing about it is, like, we did everything. Like, you want to do this work? No. We want to do that? No. Yeah. And it's just like, after a while, we're just like, are we going to, like, say yes to anything? Right. And then they had the whole merger of Elektra and Atlantic. And they're like, okay, we value you. They dropped a shitload of bands. Right. And like, okay, we value you guys. We think that you're going to do something. We want to keep you. And then we just kept going. And that's when we started writing Versions. Right. And Versions was just a really difficult period of time because it was like we were going through that. Right. And Derek had quit. Right. So Ryan, because like I said, the sound of Poison Mill came from Ryan. Right. But Derek is a very aggressive dude. And he was just like, he took the ball and he ran with it, and he had his own musical ideas. Right. And, not to say that Ryan didn't have a big part to do with it, because Ryan was a very, very massive part. There's, a Botchula is basically Ryan's song. Right. You know what I mean? Like, that's... It came from him. It came from him, you know what I mean? And without Ryan, without Ryan, there's no Poison Wall. Right. Period. But I lost my point again. No, it's okay. I do it all the time. I have long ass conversations and digressing further away
and then
from
you're
the point.
like, oh, what's that?
And you're like, where the fuck was I going?
Yeah, where'd that go?
Yeah.
But so obviously because you guys weren't playing ball, it's funny that you obviously did ask yourself that question. So it seems to me that there was obviously a huge level of uncertainty where you guys were just like, I don't know where are we going to go?
You know what it was? I think that when we signed to Atlantic, our manager at the time thought that eventually that we would play ball.
Got it.
And he thought that he can convince us to play ball at some point. And not like in a bad way, but in like, hey guys, this is beneficial for all of us.
Right.
Like, you guys play ball, you can continue doing what you want to do.
Right.
And, you might have to do a little bit of this or a little bit of that, but you're still making what you want to make. You're doing exactly, you're your own bosses. You own your own fucking company. Like, and then everybody's making their money.
Yeah.
And the label, everybody's fucking happy. You
right.
know? I think that maybe deep down he thought that he would have been able, he was telling them, don't worry guys, I'll get them to play ball. And then that shit happened where it's like, no.
Yeah. Got it.
Because there's some stuff that I was willing to do too, and then there's some stuff that I was like, man, that's stupid. I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
That's to me is just like, is not what I'm into. Now,
right.
This day and age, it's like common practice. It's just like, bring it on.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like,
do everything and anything.
Yeah, anything and everything. Like, whatever's going to get me big. And like, there's a part of me that's like really happy that like, maybe we fucked ourselves a little bit.
Right.
But at least there's a certain level of like pride.
Right.
A certain level of like, man, like, we didn't suck every dick that kind of came our way.
Right. You felt like there was a sense of like integrity in what you guys were doing. Like there was obviously
there always was, even from day one to like the last show that we played, we're like, we're going on hiatus, we're not doing this anymore.
Right.
There's always like a sense of pride and integrity of like what we will and what we won't do. Mm-hmm. And as obviously as we got older and things changed, we understood, okay, maybe we were a little too hypersensitive about that.
Right.
Maybe we're too sensitive about that, Obviously, like, if you want to continue to do this, like, we are going to have to make compromises, as long as it's not the stuff that matters. Like, as long as it's not the music or, how we sort of portray ourselves in the press, not rolling up with, like, everybody wearing, like, like
suits or whatever.
Ex-company shirt. Just like, buy this, because you're getting kickbacks from, none of that shit,
Right. No,
at that point, no one was comfortable. I mean, I'm not even really comfortable with that to this day. Like,
right.
I'll wear a shirt of something that I'm stoked on.
Right. Here's a Mountain Dew sponsorship. Yeah. I understand.
I don't even drink soda, so they have to pay me a lot of money to like roll out.
In order
and that's the funny thing. I wouldn't do that, but the reality is like everybody has a price. Right now, if Mountain Dew called me and was just like, "Yo, Chris."
Yeah,
we know that you're nobody,
right?
But we want to give you $1 million to wear our shirt because
we're
fucking stupid. Right. We think that like because you wear the shirt, you actually sell units.
Yeah,
we'll give you $1 million. I'd be like, where is the contract? Where's the check?
Let's figure this out. Right,
because in my head I'm just like, man, this is like I could buy a house now.
Right.
Like I don't have to,
all these practical things I can do with it.
Things as being like a grown ass man now that like responsible. Like I could put my money away, my Roth IRA, and
yeah.
But I'm saying like you'd have to offer me a lot of fucking money to do something that I would not be stoked on. And then obviously there are certain things. Like I said, if Mountain Dew called me, it's like, we'll give you $1 million. I'd be like, absolutely.
Right. Of course. Yeah.
Absolutely. I'll call my lawyer and be like, you are just about to get a good percentage.
Right. We're good here.
We are fooling these people into thinking that like if they give me $1 million and me have this fucking shirt that it's going to be beneficial to them in some way.
Yeah, some capacity. And so then when did you actually move out here to California?
It happened twice. So,
right. I know you guys moved out here and lived all together, was it Riverside or something?
Yeah, Riverside, because our manager at the time was from Riverside, and
right.
he moved into a new house because he's just a businessman extraordinaire, and he had the old house which was pretty dope, and he was like, hey, I'll rent it to you guys for dirt cheap. You guys can live together, because every time that we wrote records in the past, like Derek used to live in West Palm Beach, which is an hour away from me,
right,
and then Jeff used to live in Miami, which is about 45 minutes south of me, so everybody was really broken up,
right.
And we're like, if we're going to write this record, the follow-up to You Come Before You.
Right. Let's live together.
Let's be together. You know what I mean? And I didn't actually live in that house. It was Derek, Ryan, Jeffrey, and our old merch guy / tour manager, Steve.
Okay.
And then Derek quit and left. And then this dude, Jason, who ironically enough plays guitar in Sleigh Bells with Derek now. The guy that replaced him. Ryan, because him and Ryan were friends, and Jason's a really creative dude. He's an incredible tattoo artist. He's a great guy, but he's also a really great guitar player and very just genuinely creative. Him and Ryan, out of everybody, even though it may not have been the most popular material, the material that like he wrote with Ryan is some of my favorite because both of them think the same way, but they come from different places.
Sure.
So it was a really...
They were able to bounce off each other really well.
Yeah. It was really, like, it was really, really rad.
Sure.
It was really, really rad.
Oh, so, but you moved up to California, you just didn't live with them.
Oh, yeah, that's the point that I was going to try to say, is, like, they were living there, and then I moved a little bit later because I was in a relationship with this girl.
Okay.
They moved out in December, and we were finishing up the cycle in May. Mm-hmm. And she was graduating in, like, April, May. So I was like, hey, guys, move out. I'm going to live in Florida. When we finish the cycle, I'm going to pack a U-Haul with my girlfriend, and I'm going to move out here.
Got it.
And when I moved out here, I'd have our manager was like, hey, can you find me a place to live? And he did, which was like, it was like 20 minutes away from those dudes lived. So it was really close.
Got it.
Because they kind of had the hangout party house.
Yeah.
And, like, I'm just kind of a chill dude. I don't like living in the party. I like being, like...
You like to be able to visit it. Yeah.
Adjacent to I am adjacent to the party. When I want to stick my toe in it, I just go, hey, guys, let's have some beers and, like, let's get wild and kick shit. And then, like, all right, I'm leaving. Like, I'm going to go home.
Right.
Everything's mellow. And
I need to separate from this. Yeah. And so
it was 2004 because we would want to write the record, and then Derek quit, and then we're like, okay, we're in a bit of a holding pattern because, like, how do we do this?
Right.
Okay, we get Jason. Okay, we get a new bass player. We write some material. Okay, Atlantic gave us a bunch of money. We went to Sweden and started, like, the version sessions.
Right.
Came back. They're like, what is this? and at that point we're like, all right, like this is not going to work because, like, this is creatively what we're going to make.
Right.
It might be a fucking weird hodgepodge of shit that should not go together.
Right.
But this is where we're at, and this is creatively where we're at. And if you guys don't want to be a part of this and put it out, release us from our contract. And they're like, well, no, we invest a lot of money into you. So our lawyer, who's an incredible woman and an incredible lawyer, was able to pull, like, some sort of poverty, or she pulled some sort of shit where eventually, like, we just made it so difficult for them. Right. They're just like, just get out of here, leave. Yeah. Like, we just... When
did you guys actually get released from your contract from Atlantic?
It took a while. I think it was like a 6 to 9 month fucking... Ordeal. And at that point, we had, like, already started talking, like, Ferret and, like, Trustkill wanted to fucking...
Right, put out...
Yeah, we'll put it out again, and it's just like, fuck.
Right,
no,
you're like,
bro.
not interested in that. We already had that experience.
All the crap. I mean, I'm not going to talk shit about specific stuff, but all the dumb shit that we had to go through with that guy and some of the shit that he said.
Yeah.
You know, it's just like... It's like, oh, I already gave them money. It's just like, dude, you owe us more money. Like, we don't... Like... It's just
so much.
I don't want to get into. I know a lot of Trustkill bands have put public about stuff, and like now it doesn't even matter. Trustkill's not a label, Poison is not a band, so it's just dumb. It's just dumb to say anything. But it was just like the audacity that would be like, we'll go back to you.
Let's recapture that old glory.
Yeah. I mean, it would have been like
not interested in that.
So we started talking, and like Ferret was really interested, and this other label that folded like not too long after we went on Ferret. They had like Clutch at the time. Forget what it was, but you know, they were very interested. But Ferret was like, okay, we know Carl, and he's a good dude, and we spent a lot of time with him, and like he Warner, we were a little apprehensive because Warner had backing behind Ferret. Right. And like, and Carl was like, don't worry. They'll leave us alone. They give us money. We function autonomously from Warner. They just show up and give us money, and everything's cool.
Right.
Along those lines, I'm sure. Right. I'm sure there's a little bit more detail to it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we started doing that, and like just kept writing. We just kept writing more and more songs, and at that point, like Jason had left because he just didn't want to. He was getting married, and he just didn't really He just didn't have the sort of level of love and commitment that Ryan and Jeffrey and I had because we had been in it from day one. He just been in it for a while, and no hard feelings. Like I said, Jason's.
You're like, I get this. Real life comes in.
Yeah. He's a tattooer, and he had built himself as a tattooer, and like, you know, I understood why he left. It was a bummer because I loved being in a band with the dude, and writing with him was great. But you know, it was understood. So he quit, and like it's like me, Jeff, and Ryan were like, okay, well, we got to do this shit as a 3-piece. So it became like an opposite thing where like half the record was written with some people. Like, you know, obviously Jeffrey and I and Ryan involved. Right. And then the other half was just me, Jeffrey, and Ryan, pretty much. Right. And, so yeah, the Atlantic thing, it just eventually we just got out of it. Right. But, you know, then it took time to negotiate the terms for the Ferret deal. And it was like the way it was sort of happening, we were going back to Sweden, northern Sweden in wintertime, which was fucking stupid. I think that was the only availability that we had to finish it, and we were just like, fuck, man, like, I don't want to get up at like 11 o'clock in the morning and it already be like going dark. Right. Like that's not the way you work. Right. Unfortunately enough, it was like the first time ever in Sweden that because of global warming and all that stuff that it didn't snow. It wasn't considered winter because it had not reached below zero Zero. It was like sometimes it was just sludge. Sludge would fall out of the sky as like we were walking to the studio because our cottage little domain area that we were staying in was like a walking distance to the studio.
Got it.
So we'd walk every day, you know.
Right,
and sometimes Ryan would wake up early to go because we tracked all the drums in like this little lodge, like a little wooden octagonal barn, like fucking en route to like Norway. It was like not super far, but it was like a little bit of a trek out there. And so we did like a little mobile studio. We did that, and then once we were done doing all the drums, we took it back to Tone Technique, which was like the place that Pele and Espo Lundstrom that they worked out of, and like, you know, all the gear that they had from the years, and like it wasn't the original Tone Technique that they did shape.
Right.
That one was like across town, but we took everything back there because at that point, then you have endless amps, endless mics, endless all the real shit.
Obviously, as Poison the Well started to, you know, drift away, where it's like, you know, you guys weren't active, and you know, that didn't become a part of your life. Were there moments that you obviously were like, oh shit, what am I going to do? Were there moments of like actual fear from your perspective, or were you like, no, I mean, I'm scared about the unknown, but I know that I'm going to keep drumming.
You mean post Poison Well, or like in that because there was the period of time in which we weren't active for 2 or 3 years, and then we came out with versions, and then we put out. Like, that period of time, like, I didn't know where it was going to go. There was a certain level of uncertainty. Right. But I knew that I had to see it to the end. Because I was part of the inception. Right. And I felt like, for my own knowledge of knowing that, like, I gave it everything. And I was part of everything. And it was just... I committed myself to that band. And I wasn't not going to let up until the day that me, Jeff, and Ryan, you know, the core... Right. Were like, okay...
We've done this.
Yeah, like, it's time.
Sure.
You know, and that was that whole thing. So there was the ups and downs of like us not touring forever, and then finishing up versions. I remember listening to a copy as I was coming home. I think it was like 2007. I was coming home 2007, Christmas Day, and I remember listening to it and being like, okay, cool. This is really fucking weird. Yeah, and this is like a really like. There's a lot of shit going on here that's never happened. There's blues going on in hardcore music.
Right. Yeah, no, it was a challenging record.
Once again, that was a Ryan Premack, you know, thing. That was him, and you know, I'm grateful. Maybe that's not a popular record. Right. Maybe no one gives a shit about it. Maybe it won't ever be looked upon as anything. But like for me to know that like we took country, we took blues, we took punk rock, we took hardcore, we took rock, and we put it together. And just made this fucking like rad shit sandwich.
Right. No, well, I mean it's a very challenging record to listen to, but it's like when you
it's also a reflection too. Right. That was the thing. That's every record was a reflection of all of us, a collective reflection of where we all were musically and personally in our lives. Sure. And there's so much dissonance, and there's just so much like chaoticness on that record because that is what was happening from like. Derek quitting to leaving Atlantic to like people going in and out and you know people dealing with personal losses, you know, family members dying. Right. That's why that record was what it was. People are like, oh, why don't you go and just write this record? It's like Poison the Well was never a band that could just be like, oh, we're just gonna fucking go in and write radio hits. We're gonna go and write like whatever mosh parts. It was just like to us, it was just very like disingenuous to do that. There had to be honesty behind what we were doing, or we wouldn't feel good doing it. Right. So you know that shit sandwich was a audio communication of the shit sandwich that the all of us had been dealing with for like 2 or 3 years.
Right. Which I mean makes total sense because like you said, every record was a reflection of that. Yeah. When you started, I mean, like what you're doing now, like playing in Big Black Delta, and like you said, a hired gun, like, you know, you're kind of, you know, doing whatever stuff obviously makes sense that comes across your desk, so to speak. It must be fun for you to obviously experiment with so many different styles. Like, I mean, to like obviously play in a band like Poison the Well, do time and, you know, so much other shit that you've done, and to be able to play all these diverse things and still be able to like do it, you know, because there are so many drummers where it's like they get locked into a certain pattern and then removing them from that pattern. Yeah.
I mean, I still have way more to learn. Like, I don't know shit about jazz. Like, I know a little bit about Latin. Right. You know, my strengths are being a rock drummer. Yep. You know, I could go in and play a pop gig. Obviously, electronic thing I can do. And you know, you learn more as you go along with it. Now I'm learning, like, with Big Black Delta, it's at a budget level right now where, like, John doesn't have the money to really fully invest into the big production and the big everything. Sure. But it's going that way. It's things, you know, things are picking up, you know. And things are getting a lot of festival offers. You know, in about a month from now, we're going to be doing Reading and Leeds, which is going to be killer, which is a great exposure for us.
For sure.
But I think that, you know, like I said, as I'm going along and learning it, And it's like, this is the electronic world now. So I could see that once there's more money, then it's like, okay, Chris, we're going to start putting triggers on your drums, and we're going to start adding like electronic pads where you're going to start setting shit off. And like,
right.
you know, yeah, it's a simple, most of the stuff in Big Black Delta is extremely simple.
Right.
But it's extremely fun. The simplicity of it gives it
you can you just lock into it and feel.
And John and I kind of creating this like sort of dynamic now where like he sings, he writes all the material, but we have tracks. And, like everything is on tracks. It's 2 drummers, a bass player, a vocalist, and tracks.
Right.
But he runs it through Ableton to where he has this whole little like pad where he could like break the tracks into subdivisions. He could pitch up and down his vocals. He could add reverb. He could add delay. Like he could just basically it's like a little control station.
Right.
I play on in-ears, so it doesn't matter if we're playing in an arena or like a bar.
Right.
I hear exactly what he's doing. So him and I do this thing to where like he'll be playing and he'll call shit out to me. He'll be like 3, which means he's going to break the track into like the subdivisions of 3. So I understand what he's going to do. He's going to he like it's kind of like the James Brown thing where he like I have to look at him and see what he's going to do.
He's signaling. Yeah. He's following him.
He's signaling to me.
Yeah.
You know, like, and I'm like, okay, cool. He's going to want right here. He's going to, because he's just like, do whatever you want. Because I remember the first day that I rolled up, I was like, well, do you want me to play exactly off the record? Then we're going to have electronic pads, all this bullshit. And he's like, do whatever you want. And I was just like, okay, cool.
Yeah, all right,
and that's what I did. And I showed up and he's just like, awesome. You do everything I want you to do. This is perfect.
Yeah.
And I'm like, cool, like, rad. I'm shot in the dark. I'm glad this works. And then we went on tour. We toured with M83 and Jane's Addiction. And that tour we started figuring out, it's like, oh, it'd be really cool if you just soloed on this part. It's like, okay, well, I'm not soloing. It's not my strength, but you know what? Now I'm gonna have to learn how to fucking solo and get better at it. You know, and like even to this last tour, there's a song where he just started breaking shit into weird subdivisions. I just kind of started lightly soloing over it.
Yeah,
It's just like that's awesome. So
yeah, well, I mean, in tracking what you've done, obviously professionally in music over the years, like it just, you know, it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, where it's just like you've always viewed what you do as a craft, and building all these pieces to make you a more well-rounded musician. Like it's just cool, and it gives, I mean, for me who's never created music as far as writing it, it's just always cool to see people that like, you know, having a craft, like being able to build a couch or being able to build something is the same exact thing as building drums.
And it's like my background where I come from. My dad's a carpenter.
Right, exactly.
Shit, you know what I mean? And that's he builds foundations for stuff, or he adds flair to stuff, or like depending upon what sort of situation he's put in. And that's essentially what I do. Like I lay the groundwork for something. Right. You know what I mean? Like okay, this is the type of beat that I want, or like hey, this is the beat that I was thinking. Right. And I lay the foundation, and then I start dressing it up with dynamics and little little idiosyncrasies and little things, you know what I mean, to like make it
whole.
To me, like drumming wise, like it's always been about the song to me, song for me. Whether I was competent and capable to give fully to what the song needed. In my early days, I wasn't. I don't think, especially where I'm at now musically, like I wasn't fully there. To give what was needed, whether it's just a straight beat or like this weird feel. Like I've always just tried to give to the song, and that's the most important part to me is the song. Like I know a lot of drummers that just like kind of like, you know, musical masturbate over stuff, solo over shit, and they think that's like some sort of like okay, cool, I just did all this shit, so it's gonna be rad. It's just like, well, you kind of like ruined the song, right? You know, and whether the song calls for that, or the song calls for just a 4 on the floor, or just a simple 2/4 backbeat, right? Like that's the most important thing to me. Yeah, is to make sure that like I make the song better. I don't make the song worse, and at the end of the day, I contribute to a good song. That's vital. To me.
Don't think there's any better place to leave that off, because that is a nugget of wisdom right there. Well, thanks for doing this, dude. I appreciate it. So there you go. That is Chris Hornbrook. Yeah, like I said, we talked forever. I always feel bad because, you know, all these conversations, they go into really interesting places, and I always have this thing in my head being like, dude, I got to keep it around an hour, but then sometimes I kind of just let it roll, and then we end up in very interesting places, and yeah, it's just cool. So Chris and I had a great conversation, and great dude. Check out his new musical stuff. You can find him online pretty easily. He has his own website. And he also plays in Big Black Delta, which does a pretty decent amount of touring, a lot of international stuff. So check it out, because above all, he's just a great drummer. It's awesome to watch a person hone their craft for years and years and years, and that's exactly what he has done. So until next week, visit propertyofzach.com, visit 100wordspodcast.com, visit howweare.org, And the editor for this episode, as always, is Tom Richfield. And until next week, be safe, everybody.